I am very happy to introduce today's presenters. We are joined by Jeannette Adkins, NACP Chair and Executive Board Member of NOVA. She is joined with her guests, Danielle Kitchen, Senior Program Manager of NACP, and Giovanna Regan, NACP Coordinator. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to them and allow them to introduce themselves a little bit more and dive into today's topic. Thank you all for being here today.
Thank you so much, Brianna, and welcome everybody. My name is Jeannette Adkins, and like many of you who have joined today, I started a prosecutor-based victim assistance program back in 1982, probably before some of you may have been born. But I worked my entire career with the exception of a very short 2-year break where I went to the National Organization for Victim Assistance as the executive director, first filling in when our longtime director left there, and then the board allowed me to commute back and forth and hired me. But an illness in my family demanded that I come back to Ohio. So I was only there for 2 years and then back at the prosecutor's office again when I returned. And I ended my career at the prosecutor's office as the director of Michael's House Child Advocacy Center in Greene County. Love this work. It means the world to me still today. I've been very fortunate to remain involved through NOVA on the board of directors, attending NOVA conferences, doing workshops, but most dear to my heart is this program, the National Advocate Credentialing Program, that I am serving as chair currently and on the review committee since the program's inception in 2003. So I'm going to give you a little bit of that history, but I just wanted to tell you a little bit about myself and the fact that this is so meaningful to me. And I'm so glad that you have joined today to find out a little bit more about it if you're new to the topic of NACP. And I've asked Danielle and Giovanna to join us because they are the people in the NOVA office that are doing this work every day. And I'm going to let each one of them introduce themselves.
Good morning. My name is Danielle Kitchen. I am the Senior Program Manager for NACP. I started my work as a system-based advocate, 15-ish years ago at this point, and specialized in violent crimes, mostly sexual assault and domestic violence cases. Loved doing that direct service work. And when I was able to kind of take that experience and transfer that into this credential and watch that evolve into advocates who are doing this work and really just want to make sure that they are doing the best they can with it. And that means, you know, the code of ethics and the training pieces that automatically fit in with our program. It's wonderful to see people embracing that, and really what it boils down to is doing the best that they can to serve victims and survivors of crime. So like Jeannette, this is a passion for me, not only from my direct service work, but now where we see it taking the field as well. So thank you all for being here. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Giovanna to give herself a brief introduction.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. My name is Giovanna Regan, and I am the NACP coordinator. I actually started my work in this position about 1.5 years ago, so still really just getting my feet wet, and I am really truly honored and just love assisting you all so that we can all empower those whose voices deserve to be heard, right? So I'm here for you all. Please let me know if you need anything, and thank you so much. I'm so excited for this presentation.
Thank you so much, Danielle and Giovanna. And as I said, they make everything work about this program in Virginia, where the NOVA headquarters are located. That's where they're both located, and where applications are received and processed. And I've asked both of them to be here today because I wanted you to see a face with a name, and also know that both Danielle and Giovanna are incredibly helpful. If you have questions, you can see on this cover slide that credential@thenacp.org is the best email to use to ask questions as you look at your application for the first time, perhaps have questions. We hope that the overview that I'm going to provide for you today will give you an idea of what it is you're wanting to do, which level you might want to come in at, and answer some of the questions that we often hear at the workshops when people are trying to fill out the application, some of the confusion that can happen. And then after I do the overview, I'm also going to talk to you about some of the exciting changes that Danielle and Giovanna and I are thrilled that are going to actually be implemented this year, finally, in the program that we think comes from a lot of feedback from you all from the field. And we hope to make the process a little more simplified so it's not as daunting to people. And also hope that it brings more people into the credentialed advocate group so that we are a more recognized field and a credential in the professionalization of our field. So as I go along, Danielle's going to be monitoring with Giovanna the chat room. If you have questions, she'll bring those to my attention. If I mention certain things or links, she'll be putting those in the chat room for you. And then I think you're going to be getting from Brianna a copy of the slides so that you'll have all of those so you don't have to take notes. And then also another document that we have that has been implemented for this whole issue that comes along with a code of ethics and a professional credential is accountability and how we will handle through the process of any complaints that we receive that someone has violated our code of ethics. So we'll be talking about each of those things. So please raise your hand or put your questions in the chat because we do, as Brianna said, want this to be interactive if we can. I am, see if I can get this. It was working before you all got here. Brianna, for some reason, I'm unable to now forward my slides. There we go. There we go. Got it. Sorry about that. I wanted to give you a little bit of history of NACP, but the fact that we're here in Ohio with OBWA, I'm going to give you a little bit more history than what appears here, because you all have something to be very, very proud about. NACP was actually modeled after OAN, the Ohio Advocate Network. Its application and its process served as a foundation for the development of the National Advocate Credentialing Program. I'm very proud of that because way back in 1990, early 1990s, OBWA started talking about credentialing for our field. And there were many of us, myself included, that came to this job. I was hired by the Greene County prosecutor in 1982 to start a victim assistance program in his office, but I had come from a juvenile court program where I had worked on my master's degree in counseling, and had also come in on the ground floor of the Counselor Social Worker Board and that licensure. So I came as a licensed professional counselor with a master's degree. But one of the things that we had noticed through OBWA membership were so many of our members came from rape crisis centers, domestic violence shelters, community-based programs that were truly the foundation of all of our work. Your programs were there prior to the prosecutor-based programs. But many of the people in those programs, and even hired by prosecutors, were coming in with no formal education or degree. Not everybody, but many. Whether you worked on a campaign for a prosecutor or you came into a shelter or a rape crisis center from your own victimization, perhaps, and people then became volunteers, and really good volunteers because they had come from their survivorship to help others through the process, but many did not have formal degrees. And we felt that back at the time that OAN discussions began at the OVWA meetings, that we wanted to recognize experience and also provide some sort of a credential for advocates in Ohio who may not have that formal degree or the licensure that some of us had as social workers, counselors, law enforcement officers, etc. So we gathered everybody around the table in Ohio. ODVN, at the time it was the sexual assault program. We had MAD, Parents of Murdered Children, and the advocates that were working in prosecutor-based programs all sitting around the table and deciding, did we want to do this for our membership, and that we really wanted to recognize the people in the field, whether you had that formal degree or not. So that discussion happened, and many of you probably are aware of the Ohio Advocate Network and the registration, it's called. Much of the language that you see in the OAN application, the fact that it's called registration and not a credential, or we didn't go for licensure, was because of all of our discussions, many of which the comments came from the community-based programs who did not want to create a bureaucracy that their members or staff or volunteers could not attain. So we really tried to make it inclusive and not exclusive. And that was the fear that so many people had that the credentialing program would have. Now I'm going to fast forward a little bit to NACP, because we duplicated that same process at the national level with NACP to see if our counterparts to NOVA were interested in a credentialing program that would cover all of our respective constituencies or members. And so in 2001, with the blessing of the NOVA Board of Directors and our then Executive Director, Dr. Marlene Young, I initiated and invited all the other national victim assistance related organizations to a meeting in Washington, D.C., where we began having this discussion. I told them about our history, and you'll see in a minute, we also invited a couple of other states who had credentialing programs in either starting them or in place, so that we could all decide if we wanted something like this. I will tell you that at the OAN level in Ohio and at the national level with NACP in this very meeting, everybody around the table could agree on the minimum training that an advocate should have, whether they were community-based or system-based, hopefully before providing direct services. But everybody was in agreement. We knew that there would be different topics involved for rape crisis or domestic violence shelters. Many of the system-based advocates would need training in all areas: child abuse, domestic violence, sexual assault, etc. But we all could agree that basic criminal justice, crisis intervention, understanding the impact of the trauma of crime victimization, those topics that you will see in the NACP application that we require for any basic training that we pre-approve or those that already exist, such as Ohio's basics training, for example, that has been also pre-approved by NACP, that the topics were given, regardless of where you were providing those services from. That was easy. Actually providing the credential then became, a very lengthy discussion, but we decided that we would do it. And you can see that was in 2001, planning, development of the application, the processes, and everything was taken on by NOVA with input from those other organizations to create the application and everything I'm going to go over in a minute for you. We launched the program with NOVA as the secretariat, so everything was happening out of the NOVA national office in 2003. And at the time, we were grandfathering experienced advocates, and many of you I know here today are experienced. Some have around 2 years or less experience. We're going to talk about that too. But we were going to grandfather in, that was the term. You can call it grandparents, whatever you want to call it now, but it was called grandfathering at the time. We were going to say if you had 5 years of experience, you were in. And you would not have to take a test, because we looked at all the other professions out there, and so many of them had required a test. And our executive director at the time, Dr. Marlene Young, was an attorney. So she had sat for 3 days for the bar and thought advocates should have to sit for a test as well. And I'll tell you a little bit about what happened with that test. But that's how we started the program in 2003. We were going to grandfather in those with 5+ years of experience for the first 2 years of the program. That was going to expire in 2005, and then everybody was on an even playing field except for your experience, which I'll explain. Ultimately, that group of us that came from all those national organizations, both system-based and community-based, sat around a table, tried to create a test that would capture everybody's required knowledge. It was impossible, I can tell you. And ultimately, we decided we were not going to provide a test, and I will go over what the requirements are and what we will be looking at. To date, though, we've had over 10,000 advocates apply for credentialing since 2003. I'm not sure why I've got this delay in trying to forward the slide.
Jeanette, this is Brianna. I can do that. That was me that did the first one. I'm
right.
just
I must
holler.
be having some kind of a problem because I'm tapping it, but it's not going forward. I
That's
wanted
okay.
you all to see who the original co-sponsors around that table for NACP were. And you can see that most of these are the national coalitions, the National Association of VOCA Assistance Administrators, because VOCA had already happened back. It passed in 1984, and all of the grants were starting in 1986. So we had them around the table, hoping that they would also see the value of the credential and allow yourselves as program managers or directors to apply for the funds to credential your staff. Some people have done that. Ohio, Michael Sheeline has been a major supporter of OAN from the beginning, and thus the Attorney General's office has been very supportive. He has supported people going to training. He has supported people paying for credentials. I don't know, and I'm not going to speak now, being retired for 10 years from my program, what things with this funding have changed, what they have focused the funding on, or what is allowable now, what isn't. So I don't want to speak to that now, but I can say here in Ohio, we had tremendous support from our Attorney General's Office of Crime Victim Services. But that gives you an idea. And at the bottom, you'll see OAN was around the table represented, as well as the Pennsylvania Coalition on Crime and Delinquency, because they were starting their program. At this time, I believe that the state of California was the only legislated requirement for a credential, if you will. It was a certificate, actually, that every DA-based or prosecutor-based advocate had to go through the required 40-hour training, and they received a certificate as a result. And even if you or I had moved to California and had 20 years of experience in the field, we still had to take that that legislated 40 hours required training and get that certificate before we could provide direct services in a DA's office in the state of California. I'm not quite sure where that stands today, but they were the only one that we knew that was legislated. And South Carolina, Georgia, there were several other states that have worked on and since implemented some of their own or come on board with NACP. I remember when NACP started, the state of South Carolina liquidated their credentialing program in their state and paid for all of their credentialed people in the state of South Carolina to be NACP credentialed. They got them initially moved over to the national. Rhonda Barner and I were two of the people that helped develop OAN. We used to say all the time, if we ever get this national one off the ground, we'll dispel, get rid of OAN as well and encourage everybody just to go national. Because ultimately our goal here and the underlying desire was that we would credential people across this country using the credentialed advocate or CA after your name, which is what will happen if you become credentialed with NACP. We wanted that to become as familiar in our field as RN is in the medical field. So if I asked everybody here, if we were sitting in the room together, like Danielle and I usually are when we're doing this workshop, I would say, what is an RN? And everybody knows without question, that's a registered nurse. We want credentialed advocate to be as common, even though we all know that at the friendly get together with our neighbors or our friends, nobody understands what we do. And that what's a victim advocate? And you're often explaining that. So we're trying to get it to become as commonplace as RN is in the medical field. Okay, Bronna, can you forward for me, please? These are the benefits of credentialing. A lot of people say, what is this going to do for me? Those of you who have joined today that might be licensed counselors or social workers, understand that you never had to go for your license when you graduated with your BSW or counseling degree. For me, I didn't have to seek the license as a licensed counselor in the state of Ohio. But we all know that when you go to get that job, the LSW is meaningful to your job, to your pay, and the licensed counselor is very valuable, and the different levels of our licensure here in Ohio means something in the mental health field, right? So we know that if you have taken the time to go through the required training, pre-service hopefully, which didn't happen in the early years, I can tell you, we all got training after we became advocates, but the pre-service training and continuing education with your credential and the other requirements means something in our field. You are staying up to date on emerging issues. You are getting yourself trained. You are doing everything you can so as not to cause further harm to someone that you're providing services to that is a survivor of criminal victimization. So we hope that credentialing for all disciplines, but I'm speaking specifically of ours, establishes that minimum standards of what we require. And I told you that when we were all sitting around the table, both in Ohio and at the national level from our state and national organizations, we could all agree what every advocate needs at minimum to be trained before providing direct services, hopefully, whether they're volunteering their time or they're getting paid. It recognizes the direct service experience, whether paid, volunteer, internship, it doesn't matter, of victim advocates. And the levels will define that, which when I go over those, you'll understand. But what we wanted to do was, rather than test people, we wanted to recognize that I came into the field and I have the 2 years experience that some of you have here. We wanted to be able to recognize that. We wanted to recognize if those of you who have had 8+ years or would be at our advanced level, we wanted to recognize that. So when you see your certificate, I'll give you a picture of mine later on, you'll see that it means something when someone looks at your certificate and sees that you are credentialed at the advanced level, or the basic level, or the middle level. So we'll go over all of those, but that's what we're recognizing with the three different levels, actually 4, which I'll explain why we added a 4th. And then it provides standardized credentialing to victim advocates nationwide. That's the CA, that's the recognition of understanding. We are a professional field of advocates that have requirements. We adhere to a code of ethics. We are accountable for what we do in providing those direct services. The program encourages, like every one of them does. You don't know, there isn't a doctor out there or a nurse, a counselor, a law enforcement officer that does not have to have continuing education. And so we require, certainly encourage it, but require it if you're going to maintain your credential. This credential offers a mobility in the field. Though I'm speaking to those of you who may be program managers, directors with us today, but if you had 2 people that come to you with a resume and they have an NACP credential, or they have no credential, or they have an OAN credential, but they may have no other credential, you're probably going to look more at that person than you might look at the person that has not had that pre-service training or gotten that credential. So it offers us the ability to move from here to another state and show that we have the experience, whether we're community-based or prosecutor-based or system-based, but that we have that credential. That's something that speaks the language regardless of what state you may go to. And then it identifies the professional credentialed advocate by the CA, which is displayed. We encourage you to put it after your name on your business cards. We encourage you to use it in when you sign off on a letter, and to put your credential on the wall. For those of you who may be from Akron area or Summit County, or know Leanne Graham and her people up there, they sell and also have for their own people hearts, and they have a 3 hearts, 2 hearts represent basic credentialed advocate, NACP credentialed advocate, intermediate, or advanced by the number of hearts on the pins that they give their staff. And they come to the NOVA conference and sell those as well. Okay, Brianna, can you forward for me, please? Okay. I said that there were 3 initially levels of credentialing, and that was our basic, intermediate, and advanced, which for those of you who may have your OAN registration, you recognize those. We decided to add the provisional level when I was actually director of NOVA, executive director. A colleague of mine from New Mexico came to visit when he was in Washington, D.C., and he sat down with me and he said, you know, I kind of wonder, we have a state academy. And he said, when people come out of the state academy, they've had the 40 hours of that basic training that is required already. Kind of like when we come out of college with your bachelor's degree, your master's degree. And he said, is there any way that you all would consider with NACP having like a provisional credential, meaning that they've had the training like someone coming out of college with their degree, even though they don't have any experience yet? The provisional level was born at that time, and we added it. And we have, Danielle can tell us how many NACP pre-approved approximately, because they come and go. Sometimes like basics right now has been in a rest period for a couple of years since COVID. But there are other states that have their basic training every year and they submit their agenda to us and they get it pre-approved so that it counts as one of the pre-approved ones. But you have got to have completed an NACP pre-approved 40-hour minimum basic training in order to get the provisional credential. And that is automatic. People can apply for that, and I'll talk about that, what that takes, but it's a very simple process, but it gives them something to hang on to for those first 2 years. Some people hang on to it for longer than 2 years, right, Danielle?
Yes, they do.
They keep repeating at the same level. Do you have an idea, Danielle, how many, since you have your microphone off, approximately how many we have now across the country?
Of credentialed advocates or pre-approved trainings?
Pre-approved trainings.
We definitely have, I believe we're over 75 at this point, closer to 100, if not more. One of the things that you'll see on our website is that they are organized by the state that the applied organization has their headquarters in, or something along those lines. It does not mean that you have to take one that is from your state. You can take any of the trainings that are pre-approved by NACP, and that will apply back to that A-level victim advocacy training, that introductory training. While I am on while I have my microphone on, I'm going to just quick pop over to the chat. Abigail had a question regarding the provisional level training is required for further levels of credentialing. It's a great question. As of right now, you would have to take the that introductory advocacy training, one of our pre-approved ones, in order to obtain that provisional credential. If we're talking about any of those other levels, for the time being, there is an alternative training source option there on the basic, intermediate, or advanced level applications that you'll see there that allow you to take outside training sources and apply those hours back towards NACP's credential. I will tell you that effective August 1st, that option is going to be discontinued. So in the future, anyone coming in to be credentialed by NACP, regardless of the level or direct service experience, would be required to take one of those pre-approved trainings.
Thank you, Danielle. And I saw that Shelley just commented that Akron, right here in Ohio, especially while the AG's office basics is in a rest period, they offer it 4 times a year, Shelley just indicated, up in Akron. And Shelley, if you could put in the chat also if it's virtual or in person or both, if that's an option, virtual. And I'm not seeing the chat, so Danielle, if you can just see if she's able to do that for us. I just saw it popped up for me.
Yep, not quite yet. We'll give her a minute to respond there. We do have one other question here. Are you able to use previous trainings from other employment towards your credentials? If so, how far back are those able to be used? This would be additional after the 40 hours. So for that, it would really depend on what we're talking about training wise. So you'll notice in our application, there's a couple different components. From what it sounds like here, it may not necessarily be applicable towards that 40-hour credential, since you're saying it would be above and the 40-hour pre-approved, since you're saying it's above and beyond those 40 hours. But we do have other aspects of the application that Jeannette will hit on here in just a few minutes, where those hours could potentially apply.
Absolutely. Thanks, Danielle.
One more, so sorry. Shelley just reported back and said fully virtual in October and in January, and then in person in Akron in May and August.
Perfect. Which is why they also allow me and Danielle and Giovanna to share their information on the NACP Facebook page and on the website, because people from around the country could go through their virtual training, or if they want to travel to Akron, they could go in person as well. But it's an option, and we're going to give you some free options as well that you can do in your leisure and from your computer online. And we do not, for continuing education or the basic training, require that it be in person. I know for Danielle and Giovanna's information, OAN requires so many hours of their continuing education to be in person, and so many then can be virtual live webinar or recorded webinar. But there's a limit to the number that they can do that are recorded or on the computer, not in person. We don't have that for NACP because we realize we have people in Korea in the military that need to get continuing education. So we want you to have all options available. And if that's a virtual, that's good. That's okay. But to answer what I think another part of someone's question may have been, do you have to go from provisional to basic to intermediate? No, you can come in at advanced if you have the experience and can show us the training that you've had. You can come right in at whatever level you are qualified for. So each of these is really distinguished by the number of hours of experience that you have had. That experience, I have to keep reiterating, can be back when you did a practicum at the domestic violence shelter. If someone can attest to that time that you spent as an intern, as a practicum student, or as a volunteer, domestic violence shelter, rape crisis center, child advocacy center, prosecutor-based program, it doesn't matter. If you can put that in our memorandums of confirmation, which I'll explain shortly, that all of that time counts. You can use that towards these minimum number of hours you have to have for each of the levels. That's odd for my grant writers here. I know 3,900, 7,800, 15,600 are kind of odd. When we all think of 4,080 hours as the kind of the 40-hour full-time hours, we base this on 1,950 hours all the way back to OAN because of the shelters and the rape crisis centers telling us most people in the shelters and the rape crisis centers at that time didn't work a 40-hour week. They might work a 32-hour week or a 36-hour week. So we settled on the 1,950 hours to be the basis for the minimum number of hours when someone is full-time. If you work 2,080, I didn't mean to say 4,080, I'm sorry, 2,080 hours a year, we will give you 2,080 hours a year when the review committee or when Giovanna and Danielle are initially screening your application. If that's what the person verifying your hours says that you work a year, 2,080 hours, we're going to give you that when we're figuring up your hours. But those are the basic hours that you have had to have worked in this field, whether volunteer or paid again, to reach those levels. Brianna, can you advance for me? Please, thank you. This is all that is required for provisional. Completion of the NACP pre-approved 40 hours, which we've explained, and you will see on the application, or if you're applying to get your training approved that you offer through your organization, like I just mentioned, the Victim Assistance Program did in Akron. We require the 10 topics must be covered in the training, and they're very basic: crisis intervention, criminal justice system, the trauma of victimization, ethics. I mean, there's 10 topics, and they have to be covered in the minimum of 40 hours of training. We do not require so many hours of each of those topics, but they have to be covered. So once you get that NAC pre-approved certificate, you fill out the very simple application. You read and sign the Code of Professional Ethics, which you will be bound by. You sign and the certifications page. That's not being convicted of a crime. I have, I attest that this information is accurate to the best of my knowledge, etc. It's just a certifications page. And then you have to attach your certificate of completion of the NACP pre-approved training. That certificate then will be good for 2 years, where you will either be required, and some people do it, they don't choose to go up to the basic level after 2 years of experience. You can renew at the same level or go up a level, and you have to provide us 32 hours of continuing education. And as of this year, it will be required as of August. If you apply in August at that during that session, you have to have 2 hours of ethics. We have never required that before. Those of us that are counselors and social workers know we have to have 3 hours of ethics every 2 years here in the state of Ohio. We are requiring it now, especially with our code of ethics and the possibility of people being a complaint being filed that you might have violated the code of ethics. We feel that it's important that people have the 2 hours minimum in their continuing education every 2 years. So that's the provisional level. And Danielle, you can let me know as we go along if anybody has specific questions about these. If we could go forward to the next slide, please, Brianna.
Yes, Jeanette, real quick, as I do this, I want to just jump in as we're at about the halfway point and give everyone our code word for today. That word is opportunity, and that will be asked for on the survey at the end if anybody's looking for a certificate or CE credit. So opportunity.
Perfect. Thank you very much. This is the basic advocate credential, and what you're going to see for these next 3, the highlighted in yellow area is the difference that you'll see between each of these levels. So our basic advocate credential requires completion of a 40-hour introductory advocacy training. And as Danielle said, right now, you can take an NACP pre-approved and just attach that certificate without anything else. Or there's option 1, attaching that certificate, or option 2, where you look at the 10 topics that we require and you tell us on your honor approximately how many hours of training you've had in each of the topics. And you must have had some amount of training in each of those. So don't leave any blank. And I'm specifically speaking to those of you here who are more experienced advocates. You have 4+ years of experience. You know the trainings you've gotten. Danielle and Giovanna and the review committee don't want all the copies of all the trainings you've been through. We want you to go through and guesstimate on your honor approximately how much training hours you've had in each of those 10 topics that you'll find listed for a minimum of 40 hours. Those of you who've been in the field for a really long time, 10 years plus, 8 years plus, whatever, are going to find that you probably have a lot of hours in each of those topics. But again, we're not asking for the documentation. You're on your honor with that option 2 on the application. But once you are credentialed, then you have to provide us certificates of your continuing education that document it. And we'll talk about that. So if you look here, 20 hours of basic for any specialty you require. You'll see our list of specialties here in just a couple of minutes. Some people want to go through because they work in a prosecutor-based program, for example, or they work in a police department based program, and they want to check every one because they've seen people from those populations many times. Right now, the way our application is, for each area of specialty that you check, you have to show us that you've had a minimum at the basic level of 20 hours of training in that specialty topic. That's in addition to the 40-hour basic training that you've had. So if you say I'm a sexual assault specialist, you have to give us a minimum of 20 hours or document a minimum of 20 hours that you've had in sexual assault, responding to those victimized by sexual assault. So then you check child abuse and you check domestic violence because you work in a shelter that deals with all three. You've got to show us training minimum of 20 hours in each of those three areas as the application exists right now. So that is important because if you are going to say your specialty is DV, then we know that your shelter is going to send you to training that is DV related. It's going to be a no-brainer for you likely. But we tell you that we also have the option of what we call our, oh my gosh, Danielle, just went right out of my head.
Comprehensive?
Our comprehensive level, thank you so much. Our comprehensive level that is providing services to a minimum of 3 of these populations that are in the specialties. Most of us mine has said comprehensive on my certificate from the beginning. I'm pointing because it's up here on my wall beside me. And that makes it a lot simpler for you. So the change that is going to be coming is that we're no longer going to provide or ask for a specialty area and you're coordinating training with that specialty area, because here's what's happened. The field has requested over and over to the review committee, to Danielle and Giovanna, can we add, I'm working with people from elder abuse. I'm working with only trafficking survivors, and I see that that's not a specialty. Well, we've granted the request and added the specialty, added topics that are related to that specialty that people have to have minimum training in. But what's happened is our application, which if you look at it right now at the basic, intermediate, advanced application, you're going to freak out if you haven't looked at it because it's really long and there's all these pages. But if you read it and you're only going for sexual assault specialty right now, you don't have to look at all those pages in between of all the other specialty areas. So what's happened is that it's made our application more cumbersome as we've added specialties. So what we plan on changing effective probably August of this year, and I'll explain when at the end why we're doing that and when it's going to happen, is that you will be able to check the population or populations that you serve. But we're not going to require you to give us your specialty training hours in those areas. And that's going to cut our application back. And it's going to still let you recognize who you're providing services to, but we're not going to require you to show us the training that you've had. What we're going to see likely when you check those populations is in your continuing education that you give us after 2 years or every 2 years thereafter, that your training is going to be concentrated in service to those populations, relevant topics, evolving issues for those populations, if that makes sense. So for the basic level, a minimum of 3,900 hours or 2 years at 1,950 hours per year is required for you to apply at the basic level. You may have documentation for that 3,900 hours that includes, again, volunteer time you did at a shelter, in an internship you did while in college at a child advocacy center, or work as a full-time advocate in a program. Then you attach your signed code of professional ethics, your signed certificates, and a completed client contact observation form, which is completed by a colleague, a supervisor, a prosecutor who's worked with you, detective, etc., a children's services caseworker that's worked with you, that has had the opportunity to observe you with the clients that you say is your specialty area. And it's a question, they can do yes or no, they can add a lot, and we're always shocked and impressed and honored at the people who take the time to talk about you in those client contact observation forms.
But I'm just going to jump in really quick.
Yes.
when we're talking about those direct service hours, one of the questions that we get a lot is, okay, I have 2 years of experience, but it doesn't equate to that 3,900 hours. So what we're talking about when we say 3,900 hours, that is the actual requirement. When we say 2 years, that's approximately 2 years of full-time victim advocacy work. So if you're working full-time as a victim advocate, you'll likely be meeting those 3,900 hour requirement. If you're doing part-time or volunteer, you may not be hitting that within a 2-year time frame. So it's just important to note that the requirement is the number of hours, and that the 2 years is that's what it equates to when you're working full-time within the field.
Thank you, Danielle. And we'll also talk about those of you who are on call 24/7. Because a lot of people think, oh, well, I'm on call 24/7, a lot more hours than that. But we'll only give you a minimum number of hours, and I'll explain that here in a minute. Brianna, could you go to the next slide for me, please? This is intermediate. Everything I just said applies here, except that you'll see there's 20 hours of basic specialty training. And we're thinking by the time you've had 4 years minimum in the field and you're a specialist in DV or child abuse, you probably are going to have a whole lot more than the minimum required of 20 hours of basic training. You're going to have some more of those advanced topics that are evolving in the field likely. And I always take this back to a very simple example. You, for example, work in a child advocacy center as the victim advocate, but you also have now gone to forensic interviewing training. So you put that in your 10 hours of more advanced training, because now you're going to be a forensic interviewer, perhaps. Just use that as an example. So the highlighted in yellow is what you see is the main difference. We have a little bit more required as you go up for the specialty training hours, your ongoing hours. And then again, that's in addition to the 40-hour basic that everybody should have. And then a minimum of 7,800 hours or 4 years at 1,950 hours experience, volunteer or paid. And that has to be verified. And then your application will also include signing that same code of ethics, the certifications page, and having someone complete a client contact observation form for each area of specialty. So now you understand too why that comprehensive is a little bit easier. We only need one client contact form from you. We need a minimum of 20 hours, or at this level, 30 hours comprehensive. And it can be in different, providing services to those different populations you may be providing. I always like to use DV because you all have often child abuse, domestic violence, and sexual assault that you're providing pretty routinely to women and children coming into the shelter. I don't want to be biased against anyone. It could be a male as well, but for simplicity's sake, I say for women and children in the shelter. Okay, we can move forward. Brianna, please. And then this is the advanced. And you'll see the only change, again, that minimum of 20 hours for the basic specialty, then 20 hours of ongoing education in your specialty area. Because by this time, you're 8 years in, you probably, especially if you're doing DV work, or for those of us who've worked in child advocacy centers, most of our training that we're going to seek out is relevant to working in a child advocacy center or a domestic violence shelter with survivors of DV. So it's really not going to be that difficult. But again, remember, right now, the way the application appears, unless you apply after August of this year, you're going to be required to provide us with a number. We don't want your certificates yet in your initial application. We just want you to guesstimate for us the number of hours in your specialty area that you've had, and you'll see that it's designated as basic training in your specialty area and advanced training in your specialty area. And then you can see the hours jump up to 15,600, or that's essentially the equivalent of eight years at 1,950 hours. Same code of ethics, same certifications page, and same client contact observation form. So those are our 4 levels and their requirements. When you go to actually fill out your application, I know I'm going over this quickly, this overview. You have Danielle, Giovanna, myself, you have people at your disposal to ask questions. You can email that credentials at thenacp.org and ask those questions, and someone will get back to you as soon as possible. You can always call Danielle, or Giovanna, but I'm sure they'd rather get it in an email. I don't know.
You are welcome to do either one. I will say we are sometimes able to get back to you a little bit faster via email, but you are welcome to call us, email us, whichever is going to be easiest for y'all.
Any questions, Danielle, Giovanna, or Brianna that you see?
I'm not seeing anything in the chat right now.
Okay,
So we
if we
are
can,
all good.
okay, if we can go forward, please, Brianna. I see that Wendy joined us, and Wendy understands I'm so inept at anything technical. I can't get my slides to go forward, Wendy. Okay, here's the application process. You print off our application at the website that's provided on the cover page of this set of slides. And you will, if you're doing the provisional, it will be its own very brief kind of application. If you're applying at basic, intermediate, or advanced, it's not 3 different ones, it's all the same. And you have to actually read the application to skip forward for the areas that you want, depending on the level that you're applying for and the specialty areas that you check. Okay. And you're going to look at the memorandum of confirmation is crucial for your providing us verification of your minimum number of hours that you have worked, volunteered, interned, etc. Those have to be signed by someone with the authority to verify them. It could be your HR, it could be your supervisor, it could be your director, but that person will have to sign off and attest to the number of hours. You are not completing that and signing off on it. You are asking them to do that for you. The client contact observation evaluation form, again, is being redesigned, which I'll talk about in a minute, but is being designed to either yes or no, check it off by a detective, a prosecutor, a colleague, a children's services caseworker who has had the opportunity to, it could be a supervisor as well, to witness you in a phone call, in the courtroom, at the hospital, in the shelter, interacting with the survivors that you're providing services to. And they're going to answer yes or no. They have an option of adding additional comments. Again, we're always so impressed with you all and with them for taking the time to provide us with that information. But that client contact observation evaluation form is required based on your specialty for all 3 levels, basic, intermediate, and advanced. It is not required for provisional. Okay, if we can go forward, Brianna. Then we require 3 letters of recommendation right now. I believe we're in the process, and I see Danielle smiling. I think we're combining the client contact observation form, letter of recommendation, kind of into one document to make it easier for you all, and actually, frankly, easier for Danielle, Giovanna, and the review committee. But right now, 3 letters are required on letterhead from whomever you're getting it. So if you're getting it from a police department detective, you're getting it from a judge, you're getting it from a prosecutor, the letter should be on their letterhead attesting to why you qualify and are a good advocate who deserves to be credentialed. We do not want you to go and pull letters of recommendation for your last job that they talk about they will be an asset to your organization if you hire them. We're not looking for job recommendation, letters of recommendation. We're looking for specific to the credentialing process. So you could actually suggest to them it should be addressed to the NACP Credentialing Committee. You will do the signed code of professional ethics. We ask you to please read that. It was updated in January of 2021, I believe, but we ask you to read it, and you're going to sign off on it, and you will be held accountable to it. And we have actually had advocates who have been fired by their agencies for violation of the code of ethics, and they cite the code of ethics, and then they generally will even report that to us. So that's what the other handout is for. So you understand if somebody complains about you to us, to NACP, what we're going to do in response, and what we're going to gather from them, and then what we're going to gather from you as well. And then the last part of this is the not so fun part for some people. I know in my old office, we paid for our advocates to become credentialed with OAN and NACP. You may have that luxury, you may not have. We've only raised the fee one time since 2003. And if we can go to the next slide. I think it's, oops, I'm sorry. These are the specialty areas, and then we'll get to how much it costs. These are the specialty areas. We started out with the very basics down to sexual assault. Those were our first ones in 2003. From campus advocacy on have been the specialties that have been added at the request of the field. I don't know if there's anybody here that works for the Department of Defense or might be under the DSACP program. That is the kind of a sister program, if you will, that we had the honor of helping the Department of Defense develop based on NACP. That is specific to the sexual assault advocate certification program for DoD. If anybody's here that is that works in the family advocacy program on base as an advocate, the DAVA program or the domestic advocate victim assistance program, they are credentialed under NACP. And that's a separate program, someone that's not here today with Danielle and Angela that handles that for them. But we do accept, if anybody either works with a colleague that's DSACP or you are DSACP, we do accept a bridge application if you're separating from service and you want to be in the civilian world and carry your credential there. We will credential you at the level that you are currently with DSACP. There's is it 6 months, Danielle? A 6
Yep,
month
there's a 6 month grace period. So your credentials can be up to 6 months expired on the DSACP side of the house, and we would still accept that bridge application on NACP side, so you wouldn't have to essentially start all over with us.
And it's like $40.
It's a little bit of a discount there, a lot less paperwork for us.
Yeah.
We did have a quick question in the chat while I am off mute here. Jessica wanted to ask about if she's prosecutor-based advocate, if she was required to have a specialty designation. No, you are not required to have a specialty designation. And you'll see that reflected in when we talk about some of the programmatic changes at the end of the presentation. You'll start to see some of that within the newer applications that will roll out later this year that make that a little bit more clear for you on the applicant side.
And I would only add to that, if you're going to apply now before we make those changes, I would apply under the comprehensive services specialist. As I have back when I was a prosecutor-based advocate and program director, and many do, because that encompasses at least a minimum of 3 of those populations, even though you're likely providing services, maybe even to all of these in some way, shape, or form. So at the prosecutor level, unless you've been hired under a DV grant specifically, and you're only providing to felony DV survivors, for example. Okay, can we go forward, please, Brianna? You can always upgrade when you reapply at 2 years. Some people will do it before the 2 years is up when they get the time in because they're ready to go to the next level. But you're basically, showing us your memo of confirmation that is your additional hours since you first applied that take you to now qualify for basic from provisional, intermediate from basic, or advanced from intermediate, like putting a puzzle together. And then you would be showing us if you're claiming any kind of new specialty. And this happens sometimes in the past. People have gone from just the example we talked about. They worked at a shelter and they're now working in a prosecutor-based program. So they're providing services to multiple victim populations as opposed to just DV or sexual assault or child abuse. So you would have to show us right now, if you apply before changes to the application, you would show us 20 hours of specialty training based on the level you're coming in at. It could be 10 additional hours for intermediate and 20 additional hours for advanced. And I know this may all sound a little confusing and a little bit too much to get your brain around right now. Don't worry about it. When you go to actually do it, it'll probably maybe be a little less confusing, but Danielle and Giovanna are right there to answer questions for you. And we're happy to help you through it. The on-call issue I wanted to mention, because a lot of people say, well, I'm on call, so I work, thousands of hours a year just being on call. We appreciate and respect the fact that you stand ready. We don't count it only by the number of cases that you go out to a hospital or a police department or respond to someone. We do credit you with the time that you stand ready on call, but that is a minimum of 1,950 hours a year, and it is not in addition to your job responsibilities. We won't give you your hours that you work plus 1,950 hours because you're on call as well. We will give you the actual hours that you're on call. So if you're a staff person that rotates on call one weekend every month, we'll give you from Friday, whatever time you close, till Monday morning when you all reopen again, those hours once a month times 12. So we'll work with you on that, but there are people that come in thinking, okay, with my hours on call, I have the minimum 3,900 or I have the 7,800 hours when you've been working for maybe less than a year in your program. But because you've been on call, you've got all those hours. That's the best way I can explain it to you. And we are really looking at actual experience with those hours. Okay, if you can go forward, please. The renewal requirements besides your additional hours of work or volunteer time, but the hours that you have up in addition to the last time you applied that would take you to that next level, you have to give us your 32 hours of continuing education. And that's every 2 years. Then pay the applicable renewal fee, which is slightly different depending on what you're doing. And then again, you have to add the 20 hours or the 10 to 20 hours of specialty training if you've added an additional specialty area only. If not, we don't need anything else in that area. If we could go forward, Brianna, please. Oops. Okay. And then you have to have that client contact observation form if you add a specialty area. No change in specialty, no client contact form again, only if there's a change. And I just talked about the on-call hours. If you could go forward, Brianna, please. Okay, here's the cost. Again, we've only raised this once since 2003. And that's just simply cost of materials and the number of applications increasing and the number of review committee members, etc. But the provisional advocate credential is $70. The $55 is for anyone that has served our military. And that also includes those people who work on base as civilians. So that would be the cost for the provisional. The basic, intermediate, and advanced is $140. If you have served our country, we appreciate that, recognize it by giving you that military discount would be $110. And we take money order, check, or credit card. Once your credit card information is entered, those pages are shredded so that they're not laying in a file somewhere. And I can tell you, Danielle has everything under lock and key as well. So you guys let me know if there are any questions and we can go forward. Please, Brianna. When you're renewing at the same level every 2 years, it's $100, $80 for those who have served the military. And then if you're renewing and upgrading, it goes back, it's the $140 and the $110. And that's when you're upgrading to a higher level, new certificate, card provided, review of your continuing education, as well as your hours, etc. when you're going up a level. Okay, we can go forward, Brianna. Okay, this is where I want to talk about the changes, and I hope to allow any time if there are any additional questions based on these. Starting in August of this year, we will require 2 hours of ethics training in that 32 hours of continuing education every 2 years. There are several locations that, and I always want to put this out there, Office for Victims of Crime in the Department of Justice, OVC, who administers our VOCA grants. So many of you are familiar with them, especially if you're the grant writer or the program manager for your office. They have what's called VAT online, Victim Assistance Training Online. It is on the OVC website, accessible there, accessible 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and it's free. You can join, you can look at basic training. So if you have new advocates and you haven't had that 40-hour NACP pre-approved training and you want to do that and go the provisional route, you can do it for free in your own time, meaning coming and going from your computer or laptop. And it is, you'll have to do the basics that they've marked as introductory and basics. Danielle, have they changed any of the designation of that one? Is it clear when someone goes in?
So when you go to, I'll actually put a copy, it's on our website on that pre-approved training list, but I'll go ahead and put the full link in there. You'll see that their course is comprised of 4 different module heads. So you have to complete all 4 of those, and that will get you where you need to go for completing NACP's minimum requirement for training.
Thank you. And then they also offer other topics that are specific to a population you might be serving, to an emerging issue, again, free. And you can go in there and use that for your continuing education. If you have been through 2 days in May here in Ohio, you've been through another couple of trainings, workshops, in services, etc., but you find like, oh my gosh, I'm 2 hours short of my 32 hours and I need ethics. You can go in there and do their ethics for free.
And you'll see on our website too, because we are making this a requirement effective August 1st, NACP will always have 2 hours of free ethics training that is updated by our Office on Victim Advocacy ethics staff every year. That way you don't have to hunt it down. You're welcome to, we had decided that you will be able to repeat those ethics courses. The rest of the renewal requirement says that you may not repeat courses that you've already taken. The exception to that is going to be ethics, because there's not a whole lot of victim services ethics courses out there. So we acknowledge that.
Yeah, thank you, Danielle. And then another service to you through NOVA is the Office for Advocacy Ethics. And you can actually go there and ask an ethical question. If you have a dilemma, you can ask a question. We were providing an actual written opinion. I think you can get feedback or consultation on a question that you might have personally about an ethical question based on the code of ethics for you personally. But they also may be fielding some of those complaints for us. And then they have a committee and we have a review committee. And we have the NOVA NACP trained staff that is two of them, Danielle and Giovanna, are here today. They're the NOVA team for NACP. But there is also a committee on the Office for Advocacy Ethics. That's a service that NOVA provides. And we are developing that formal appeal process for applicants who may not be satisfied if the review committee decides to suspend your credential or in some way take your credential back. If there is a ethics, I can tell you in my year since 2003, I've been on the review committee the entire time. It's been rare to receive a formal complaint and rare for us. Usually we require ethical training for someone so that they learn from, crossing a line, the mistake, not quite understanding. So we are putting a formal appeal process together, and you can see the process in the handout that Brianna is providing for you along with these slides that gives you an idea of what happens when Danielle receives something and how the staff is going to deal with it and how the review committee is going to deal with it. Let's see. We could go forward. I think there's another section of this one. Again, we're going to take away the designation of the specialty areas, which will remove so many pages from this application, and just let you check the population or populations that you are serving. Continuing education should, however, we always want to remind people, reflect the populations that you're serving, hopefully. And most of the time, your supervisors are wanting you to go to training that has to do with where you're working and who you're serving. And then for those of you in this today that are experienced, have been around for a while, that right now could go in and fill out our option 2 we talked about, where you guesstimate the number of hours and the 10 required topics for pre-service training. By August of this year, that's going away. Everybody who applies, whether you've been in the field for 8 years or 2 years, or just joining our field, will have to have an NACP pre-approved training program. Here at Ohio, you have, hopefully basics will be coming around again. You have VAP training up in Akron that we've already mentioned, and you always have that online for free that you can do in your own time. Those are just some of the freebies or the available ones. The disciplinary guidelines I just talked about, you're going to get that as a part of the training. Anything to add, Giovanna, Danielle, or any questions?
No, I think really the only piece is that these changes, if you go onto our website today, you will not see these changes reflected yet. If you already are on NOVA's listserv for emails, one of NOVA's members, or connected with NACP in that respect, you will get e-blasts as we start to roll out this information that will link you to some of those changes. You'll also see some changes to our website as this happens. So don't be alarmed if you see some redirects pointing you in the correct direction as we get there. We will go, like I said, we will go ahead and put as much of that information out there as possible as soon as we are able to. That way you're prepared as we move forward. And when we do start rolling out some of these changes, we will also provide a timeline for any grace period that will be given with the old applications, forms, and things of that nature as well.
Thanks, Danielle. And if you could move it forward, Brianna, please. These are the application periods that you can submit anytime, for example, between November, January 31st. Right now, the second one would apply for anybody that's interested in getting it in and reviewed by May. Some of the changes you may start seeing in the application. So as Danielle was saying, I would always go to the website and make sure you have the most recent application when you decide to apply. But it shows you where we review them also when the review committee meeting is held for each of those periods.
One quick note on that, we do always post the review schedules every year to our website. So I'm going to put those in the chat here so you know exactly when the committee is convening. The only slight difference on here is the February to April 30th application window reviewed in May. That's sometimes May/June, depending upon how holidays fall and our committee's availability. And something similar with that August 1st to October 31st application window. We strive to have everything taken care of in November, but holidays, flight prices, trying to make sure that we can keep those application fees steady. Sometimes that occurs at the beginning of December instead of November, just so you are aware.
Thank you. And again, you're going to get a copy of this. Brianna, if we can go forward, please. And this is just mine, my card and my, it's old, but my frame certificate that I had in my office, I now have here in my home office. And you would get this certificate, and then once it's updated, you would get another certificate as you go up the levels. I just wanted people to see that the wallet card is something you can carry with you if you would like. I tend to tuck mine in the corner of my certificate because it shows the most recent renewal and the date that it will expire as well. And if you can go forward, Brianna. This is just one of the advocates, but I thought it was really cool what her sheriff said. She was a law enforcement-based advocate, and she had posted this, I think, on their Facebook page. So I asked her and her sheriff if I could put these up in our workshop slides, and they agreed. But you will see, and it's always so wonderful for me to see, and along with, not sure if it's Giovanna helping me, but somebody is helping with the Facebook page now. We do have a Facebook page if you want to find us on the National Advocate Credentialing Program and like us. We put announcements on there. When I see you all doing really great things and I hear about it, I post it. So that just saying, here's a CA doing another great work. And we often put the announcements there. I put training announcements there. When Leanne and her staff share those with me, I post those there up in the Akron area. So you can follow us there as well. And I think we have maybe one more slide that might have, yeah, it just has the website again. So any questions? I know we only have a few minutes, but were there any other questions? I hope we've caught most of the ones that you had as we move through these slides. But if anybody has anything else, we'd be happy to answer it. Don't see anything, Danielle?
Nope, nothing coming through.
Well, I'm going to thank you all for being here on behalf of Danielle, Giovanna, and myself, and OVWA, of course, dear to my heart as well. I've been a member since 1982. So I really wish you all well. And if there's anything we can do to help you as you process the application, look at it, begin to complete it, please don't hesitate to let us know. And I hope to see you all and joining us as credentialed advocates professionally and helping to build this field's professional reputation. Thank you.
I just want to jump in and, oh, sorry, Danielle. I just wanted to thank all three of you. I did see in the chat, someone mentioned that they missed some of the meeting. I have been recording this, so I do plan to post this on the OVWA website. It's ovwa.org. So keep an eye on it there. And then Jessica was looking for some email addresses, and I don't know if any of our presenters want to share any contact information in the chat before we wrap up.
So I went ahead and threw the credentialing email address in there. That is really the best one. We are a small team, so it sometimes happens if you're emailing with Giovanna or with myself and we happen to be out sick, then your email goes unanswered for a couple days. So if it goes to the credentialing inbox, we both maintain that. So that's going to be the best bet to make sure that we're able to get back to you quickly.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much. If there's any other questions, let us know. Otherwise, when I close this out, you're going to see hopefully should see a survey for this presentation. And again, that opportunity was today's code word. And keep an eye on the website for this recording if you'd like to revisit it or if you missed anything. And certainly reach out to this team at credential@thenacp.org if you have any questions. And then you can also reach out to us, OVWA. That would be info@ovwa.org. Jeannette and Danielle and Giovanna, thank you so much for being here today and going through all of this great information.
Thank you all so much. Thanks for
Thank
all the
you.
work you're all doing as well.